Record on this computer. We are now recording this session.
Have you pinned it to you?
Yes, it is pinned to me,
Okay.
and I am turning the light and the camera on. We're going to be doing transfers this week. There are many ways of doing transfers. Here I've done a transfer onto gold clay. And what I do is I take a sheet of images, such as this sheet, take it to Kinko's and run it through their color copier. I then cut them out into whatever image size I want. Now, you'll notice I have left a little bit of white around the border. Let me put it on black so you can see. So I've got a little bit of white left around the border. And the reason for that will become apparent later on in just a few minutes. But let me take one of these images. I like that image. And the way I do this, and I've been playing games to make sure I know what I'm doing, is I will take some liquid clay and do it with my fingers. And I just get the liquid clay down to the nib. There we go. And I am going to spread the liquid clay, just a thin ribbon of it all over this image. I don't need it very thick. In fact, I personally prefer it fairly thin. And I have tried a lot of tricks for this next technique, but the one that works best is to use my fingers and just spread it across the image. And he said, there, no, lost it, got it. And by putting it across the image, and just make sure I get it fully covered, and you'll notice I'm actually running off the edge, which is okay. So once I've got it spread all over the image, and I'm trying to get it fairly smooth as I'm moving it around. And it helps if you get the light on this so that you can kind of see where things are. I don't know if I can show this in the light. You can see that it's fairly smooth. There are one or two spots where it's a little thin, and so I'm going to just touch that up just a hair and make sure I get a nice uniform covering on that. Now, what I would normally do is run half a dozen to a dozen of these on one tile. Actually, I can get 6 of that size on this tile. And then I'll put the whole thing in the oven and bake it for about 20 minutes at 275. This is liquid sculpting, so it bakes at 275. As I play with it, I can see other spots that aren't quite covered. And so we need to kind of touch that up just a little bit more. Again, getting the light to reflect off of it is critical, because then you can tell from the sheen where things are. And if I can get a good reflection, there we go. You can kind of see that it's got a nice covering on it. So that's going to go into the oven. And then when it comes out of the oven, because I ran over the edges, you'll notice I've got some liquid clay sticking on the edge. I've also got the white border on there, which I want to get rid of. Now, the reason for doing this is I'm going to throw this whole thing in water. I want the water to soak into the fiber of the paper. So since I know I have clay across the edge, if I trim off that white edge, then I know I'm exposing the paper all the way around. And so then the water can soak into the fiber and make it easier to remove the paper from the backing. So just go ahead and trim this thing up nicely.
Hey, Bob, how long did you bake it for?
Get a glass of water that I
Bob?
brought from Jason's.
He said he baked it for 20
This
minutes.
thing just goes in there and I let it sit for an
Thanks.
hour or two at least. Now I've got some of them in here that have been sitting overnight.
Yeah,
I'm going to take a few of them out and put that one back in and make sure he goes down far. Oh, okay. He's all the way down, so he's sitting in the water. Now, this one went in last night. I'll give one to you ladies, but it's a little hard over the internet. Take another. Okay. And what I do is I then, you can see one side has got the paper on it, although it's very wet. The other side is nice and shiny because it's got the clay. So I put the shiny side down so the paper side is up. Make sure I've got my wet fingers, so, and because you need to keep this paper really, really, really wet while you do this. And just gently rub. Go ahead and take some water if you need to, Christine.
okay.
And you'll as you rub, be gentle because I've rubbed the image off on some of these. You'll notice the paper start peeling up. And you just want to keep going until you get the paper all the way off. Although I find that the longer you soak these pieces, the easier it is to work with. And you get lots and lots of balls of paper. There are a few problems you can run into, and I will cover one or two of those, because I've got a sample of one in front of me, so you can see what happens. And we'll just keep going with this. I know this is boring, sorry, folks, but some of this stuff just gets incredibly boring. But again, you can see the image is starting to, the paper starting to go away. The image is starting to show up. As you work this, you can kind of feel whether or not the paper's still there. You may want to get your fingers with some more water on there, Christine. But help yourself. If it does start to dry out, don't hesitate to get it wet. Because again, the goal is to keep the paper really wet so that you break down the sizing that holds it together without moving the camera too much. And now then eventually you can feel it as you keep rubbing. You'll start feeling that you get down to a smooth surface. A lot of the roughness is gone. And you'll have a nice smooth surface you're playing with. And that's when you're down to the clay and you need to quit. Because like I say, I have on a few of these rubbed them a little too hard or a little too much and actually pulled the image off the clay, which is not your goal. You want to make sure you keep the image there on the clay, because the goal is to transfer it fully to the clay. Now, I'm almost there. I can tell I'm getting close, but you guys don't need to be watching me do that. And Christina here can keep playing and have fun. I told you there are some problems. Once in a while, you end up, and I don't know if you can see it, but you end up with some clay on the back of the paper. In this clay case, I've got a little bit of clay went under the paper while it was, yeah, a little bit of clay went under the paper. So I've got this piece of clay right here. As long as I've got it really, really wet, again, there's nothing holding the paper together. So I can kind of take a thumbnail and gently move that, and that piece of clay will just come right off. And then I can keep going with what I was doing. So this one had that problem, and I left it intentionally just so I could show you that trick, and that it works quite well. Now at this point, I'm going to try something a little different. You should never try something in a demo without first doing it at home, but oh well. I wanted to try this anyway, and so we're going to try it. This is hand sanitizer. It's been refilled half a dozen times, but it's the Purell hand sanitizer. I'm going to put a couple drops, hoping that the alcohol will help me break things down and get stuff to release. I don't recommend starting with it, but but I have done this once or twice. And I find out that it does sometimes help just to give a little different reaction with the paper and the sizing, and helps the ink to release sometimes.
Should I do that too?
It's up to you. You can try it. I have my audience here is following my every example. And you will eventually, you should feel it's get smooth. I can tell this one's getting really, really close to getting down there and getting smooth. And I am looking around because I thought I had some samples that I had completed lying around here. It is a very tedious process, but it does, you do get some nice results out of it. You get these images on the clay that you can work with and do all kinds of things with. Okay, you people don't need to be watching me do this. And I can finish this guy up at home. And Christina's having all kinds of fun over there. So with that in mind, once you've done the transfer, you've got a piece of baked clay with an image on it. And there are many things you can do with that. These are some samples. This is a focal piece on a necklace that my wife is pestering me to finish. So you can see I've done another technique to crackle the clay itself and then put the image in there as an inset. I was probably going to make this into the lid of a box. I was just trying to see what I could do with it. So again, I've got a nice transfer here. I put some foil on clay for a border around that, and then black around the outside of that, just to give me a nice little piece to play with. I played some games, and this one didn't come out well, but it was first experiment where I actually put some gold foil under the image after I had done the transfer. So I put gold foil on black clay and then put a thin sheet of TLS on top of the gold foil, and then put the image that I already had the transfer on top of that. Again, that one didn't come out well. This is one where I neglected to put the liquid Sculpey down thoroughly first. And so it's starting to come loose. So you got to make sure you get the liquid Sculpey on there correctly. Trying to see if here I actually did the transfer onto a sheet of liquid Sculpey and then was wrapping it around a barrel bead. So you can see it does a nice job there. Good way to bracket it. This, I hadn't decided how I was going to finish this, but I thought a keyhole. I could put a lady behind the keyhole, and the actual image is much larger than the keyhole is. And so she actually extends out quite a ways underneath of this, but the clay was soft and unbaked when I assembled everything except for the image itself. And so you can do all kinds of, I think that was about the size of a trading card. And then just for entertainment's sake, I did try this technique on a piece of gold clay. And as I hold this in the light just right, I can see that I didn't quite get all the paper off of it. There's a few hints here and there, but it didn't do too bad. It doesn't work as well as it does with a liquid clay. So I don't recommend this for beginners, but if you've done a lot of transfers and feel confident and want to try something different, you can try it on a piece of regular clay. So those are some of the things I've done with transfers. That's interesting. I was looking at this one, a lovely transfer. I like it, really nice. There's only one problem with it. It didn't stick. I need to put a little liquid sculpting behind that to make it stick better. And again, another postage stamp. This is, again, I do a lot of things just to try and see if I can figure out how to make it work. And so this is one of those that I was working on trying, and it came out pretty good. Having said that, if there are questions, please ask. Otherwise, I will move on to something else in the demo. There are no questions. Did I cover everything? Yes.
Okay, so Bob, after you rub the paper off the back,
Yes.
what's the next step?
Okay, at that point, you've got a sheet of translucent clay. And what I would do, depending on what you want to do with it, and let me pick this piece right here. I would then, what I did for this was I took a piece of black clay and rolled it through the pasta machine so it came out about a medium thickness. Took another piece of clay, black clay, and did something, a technique to it that I'll talk about in some other future demo. Cut a little image, cut a hole in the middle of it so that it was bigger than the image I was going to put on there. I took the first sheet of black clay, put it on my work surface, put the image down on that sheet of black clay, took the sheet of clay with a hole in it, put that on top of the image. In fact, in this case, I think the image is smaller, maybe just a touch smaller than the hole. So I could just put the image down inside. Put a little liquid sculpting below the image to make sure it adheres,
Okay,
and press it down. And I've been known to run over it with a brayer just to make sure it sticks really well. Again, put the window on top of that. Maybe a little bit of liquid sculpting around the edge to, again, kind of make sure it glues together, and then bake it. And I've got this nice focal piece.
okay,
Again, for the bead, the bead's solid. It's a solid bead. So made the core of the bead, put the transfer on there with liquid sculpting underneath of it. Liquid sculpting runs through this whole thing.
okay, okay,
And then I cut out a thin piece of clay on top and wrapped it around the bead, making sure I had a window for the image to show through. And then I baked the whole thing.
You wait
Thank
for
you.
it to be dry before you.
Yeah.
I wait for the image to be dry.
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
right.
I
Thank you.
yes, I said, yes, sorry. I do not want the image to be wet, so
Yeah.
I'll let it set for a while, an hour, half an hour, however long it takes to dry. Another reason you want to let it dry is once it's dry, you can see if there's any little white flecks on there where you didn't get the paper off. And
Very
so
important.
if you look at it again and see the white flecks, you know, okay, I need to remove a little more paper from there, and then I can move on. In fact, I probably have one or two here. Yes.
Does it matter how fresh the copies are that you're transferring?
I'm trying to remember. It's best if they're fresh. Let me answer it that way. I don't think it matters too much. I've done it with some that are fairly old, been around for a few weeks, but fresh is always a little better. It does. I mean, it just works better if it's fresh. Again, and they changed the ink in the copier. They changed the type of ink in the copiers a lot, so that what I had done 3 or 4 or 5 years ago doesn't work anymore. I had to come up with a different technique for this one because they changed how the ink binds with the paper, so it just takes something different every time. But another reason you want to take fresh images. And I lost my person with the expert questions. Oh, yes.
So Bob, can you tell whether this is good or not?
There's a little bit of paper left on there still.
Oh, okay. I'll keep working on it.
Well, what I would do, and Christina is here with me. I'm going to dry it. I've got a piece of paper towel that my wife gave me. We'll dry it on the paper towel. And then we will set it aside for a few minutes. And there's just a touch of roughness when I run my thumb over it.
I see.
And if you look, there's a few flecks of white here and there. You can see a little bit of white starting to show up. Set it aside, let it dry.
Okay.
Which
Yeah.
side do you put down when you?
I put what was the paper side down, because if you put the clay side down, then you've got the image on top. And if it rubs up against something, it can come off. In part, I'm using the liquid clay as a protector for the image. So if I put the liquid clay side down, I would again put a layer of liquid clay over the top of that and bake it down, just to make sure I get a thin protective layer on top of the image. Lots of good questions. This is fun. I said there were several techniques I was going to show today because I knew this demo wasn't going to take too long. And I'll ask Christina, would you like to see a ghost image? Or
Oh,
would you-
yes, a ghost image.
Ghost image. Oh, here's another sample I've got. Again, I made this, but did the transfer. Put liquid Sculpey, ran it through on burnt umber this time. Put the image on there, made the top piece using one of my faux wood techniques. Cut out the little window, liquid clay all over everything, making sure it all holds together. And then assembled it and baked it. Okay. Another one is called a ghost image. This is a very nice image in this clay. If you run your fingers over it, it is almost perfectly smooth.
Wow. Yeah.
She's seen it.
Yeah.
She has it.
Okay.
For those of you that have been around me a while, you've probably seen me do the ghost image. It's one of my fun techniques. For Christina, we will do something. We'll do one. Let's see. I need gold clay. I need a phosphorus. You got a phosphorus sheet. I need a clamp. You got a clamp? Thank you. My lovely assistant there. Gotcha. Okay. Got a crank. Works. I am taking gold clay. Got a chunk of gold clay here. It's fairly soft. My student is having a ton of fun over there, moving paper.
Because if you are not careful, you can make holes. I have already made a couple pin-size holes
Yeah.
on it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you are. Whoa,
Another reason to let it dry in between is because then you can kind of see where there's paper left, so you're not rubbing areas where there isn't.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not continuous.
yeah, just, you know,
Yeah. Leave it.
after a while, set it aside.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's paper on it still.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Very obvious.
Yeah.
This one.
It will be obvious in a few minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. You will see where the paper is and you can then rub some of those spots. Right now, I'm simply running the clay through the gold clay. This is Primo Gold, by the way. You probably well know that I work mostly with Primo clay. my big reason is I like playing with mica, and I like the mica that Primo has. This is not to condemn Fimo for any reason, but their metallic clays and their pearl clays don't seem to have a lot of translucency to them, so you can't get any depth. The mica in them is nice. It gives good reflection. It's got a nice albedo to it, but it does not give you any depth of the image. So a lot of the techniques I use with the mica don't work in Fimo. Kato clay. With Kato clay, I found out that they put probably more mica in there than I like. And so what I will do is I will take up to 50% metallic gold Kato and 50% Kato translucent, mix them together, and I get down to where I've got a nice effect. So with that in mind, that is what I'm working with. Let me steal that piece. Okay, having done that, I've got a nice piece of clay, gold clay, nice and shiny. Part of my demo is on this is to show you that if it's got mica in it, you get a different color of the clay on when it's on edge than when it's straight down on top. And so you can see it's kind of a dull brown gold look there, but it's really, really shiny when it's on top. That's because with the mica, I've run it through the machine several times, and so all the mica flakes are lined up this way. So when I look on edge, I'm looking at the mica on edge, and it doesn't transmit light that way, so it's dark. Here it reflects light perfectly. Actually, it transmits light this way. Here it reflects light, and so you get a nice shiny reflection on it. Now, what I, at this point, need to do is to decide what image I'm going to play with. And I think I'm going to, being a guy, I'm going to take a ship. I'm using one I've never used before, so sorry about that. I know better. But I'm going to take this ship and press it into the clay. And you want to really, really, really press it into the clay. And I have a few friends that stand on their stamps to do this. I don't recommend it. Now, normally, I recommend using an unmounted rubber stamp. Sometimes these things get stuck, but I know from the size of the stamp and looking at it carefully, I don't think that's going to be a problem. But one nice thing with a unmounted rubber, I can lift up a corner and make sure I've got a good image. With a stamp, with a mounted stamp, I can't, so we just see what it looks like.
Wow.
Okay, it will at least demonstrate the effect. I should have a nice ghost image at the top. The bottom, I didn't get pressed down firmly enough, so it's not going to show up well. But without explaining, I'm going to trim this up just a little bit. It is going to make it easier. If I was doing this for a piece, I would make sure I had enough play for the finished piece. But right now, I just wanted to demonstrate the technique. So what I'm going to do is my blade is flat here. I'm going to tilt it just ever so slightly. And then do the one thing they tell you never to do. I'm going to cut towards me. Now, by the way, I don't know if you can see, I am bending the blade just a little bit. So there's a little bit of curvature to it. So it has contact in one point and not near the edges. Gives me a little more control of the depth and how I'm cutting this thing. And I'm going to have to adjust because my technique requires that it's against me. Because if I don't have the tile anchored, it moves. And so I want the tile to stay flat and anchored, and so I'm gonna keep it from moving by pushing it against me. And they tell you never slice towards you. But GP, people, sorry about that. And when you start slicing, I generally take small slices. I don't try to slice too deep on the first pass. I don't try to slice a lot on the first pass. I just want to make a nice slice through this thing. And you can see me throwing the clay off the side. Okay. So as I am going through this thing, the cutting clay, you can see I haven't got it fully cut yet, but I'm getting down to the right level. So we just keep going. And we're just going to keep cutting through this thing and down and down. And I'm trying to get down right to the very top of where the stamp was. So what I don't want to cut is any deeper than I push the stamp into the clay. So there's a little bit of the unmoved clay on the surface there. Because what happens when I push the stamp down, the clay where the stamp was pushed tilted. So now it's going to reflect the light funny. So the clay where the stamp was pushed all the way down is now flat again. And then to the edges, it's got this tilt to it. And that tilt then causes the light to reflect funny and give you a shadow that actually moves as you tilt the piece left and right, or front and back. And so the trick is not to cut too deep. So I'm taking very shallow cuts, just trying to keep it a little bit of a cut there. And see how things are going. We've got a little bit, as I run my finger over this, I can feel the clay in a few places. Again, the problem with the ghost image is you can fool your eyeball into thinking that it is not cut because you get a shadow there, but the shadow is caused by the differential reflection from the light of the tilted mica and not actually due to the clay not being trimmed. So again, you need to kind of take a careful look at it and make sure that, and again, your finger is always a nice tool for this. We've got a little bit of a problem right here. There it is. That's the piece. And cut this guy just ever so slightly. And at this point, now that should look like a ship, people, and it should look like there's a nice shadow around it and that it moves here and there, but it is fairly close to being flat. And I'm going to pass it to Christina, who will touch it and look at it and play with it
Wow,
and say,
amazing.
it is definitely flat,
Yeah,
but it looks like there is something there.
wow, amazing. Amazing.
Fun things you can do with clay.
Yeah.
So what types of stamps work best for this?
Okay, the stamps that work best with this have got a deep image to them and not a lot of detail. So I picked this one. Hey, I'm a guy and I like ships.
Yeah.
It does have some deep images. There's not a lot of detail there. I can do it with others. And in fact, I'm gonna pull this guy up and I'm going to run into the boss machine just once. Twice. Oh. Make sure it comes out nice and smooth. And then I'm going to wide him up and destroy it. Because we're gonna do it the same thing with a different stamp. I'll show you what happens when you get a lot more detail. And again, if you practice, if you're good, if you do this a lot, you can do it with some complex stamps that have a lot of fine detail in them don't work so well. Fuji here that I made. It is, in fact, if I haven't showed it to you, this is my Mount Fuji. You can see there's not a lot of detail in the stamp. But it does have some nice character to it, and it's rather deep. So in that sense, it works really nicely. A stamp I would not use is this one. I'm going to have trouble getting the clay down into all the little indentations. And there's some fine detail here in the leaves. This fine detail in the leaves, right along in here, that fine detail is not going to be picked up. It's too thin a surface, not very deep there. And so it's not going to work that well with this technique. Now, I haven't tried for a while. I was going to do another demo with it, and I'll do that demo in just a second. Is this particular stamp, and I cannot tell you right now where it came from. It's got a lot of good depth to it. Not very much of the stamp is shallow, which is good. And as you can see, I like this stamp. It's got clay on it already from other tests I've run. And I'm going to take just a small, actually, let me just do this. I'm going to take, again, my gold clay, because the gold really works best for this technique. Silver is nice. The copper takes a little bit of work. Some of the pearl clays are great. Some of them don't do well. I'm not sure what the trick is there, but the gold has always worked for me. I'm trying to remember, the peacock pearl I thought worked, and the light green pearl didn't, or the other way around. But I'm going to press this guy, and I'm going to use my thumb to press him into the clay. And then, like I said, I can, since this is an unbounded stamp, I can hold this piece down and lift up one corner and see if I've got a good image. And I think I need more pressure, which is why some people stand on this thing. However, I think I should be able to push hard enough, firm enough with my thumbs to get an image that is deeply embedded into the clay. And again, there's enough detail on this that it does take more force to get this image into the clay than it does others. Dry it off, set it aside. Instructions
Do
to,
you think you still have paper? I think a little bit, right?
There's-
Because it's kind of roughened it back.
Mhm.
yeah, if you're doing,
Uh-huh.
removing the paper and it's just a touch rough still, you've got a little bit of paper still on there.
Okay.
But sometimes let it dry anyway and see if you can see where it is. And then you can go from there. Okay, I've got an image on this piece of clay. Now, again, this has got a lot of detail in it, So I'm gonna have trouble pulling this off. But here we go. I'm gonna start at this corner and just gently slice. He said gently slice. There we go. I'm trying, you can see the slices, I'm only hitting just the high points. Trying to make sure I don't go too deep. I have gone too deep on some of these in the past, so I get paranoid about doing that. So I'm really trying really hard. And again, you probably can't see this, but the clay, the blade is bent. I've got it, the ends up. I'm pushing down with my thumb just a little bit to control, so I can get more control on the blade. And you can see as I slice, I'm getting just the fairly fine pieces of clay that I'm pulling up. So I don't want to go overly deep. And I'm trying to get the image down to where the image itself is smooth without you digging too deep into the clay. I should probably show you what happens, and just I'll do that in a few minutes. You go too deep. Again, this is just a demo, so I may as well demonstrate that part of it as well. Just so you know. It's not irreversible, but it does have a nice effect. Now, I have been known to take these pieces when I had a good piece, a good long strip, and put them down on top of another piece of clay. If you flip them over and put them down, you can actually get a reverse ghost image, which is kind of cool. But you need to get bigger slices than what I'm taking here to pull that off.
Do you need a fairly new blade for this?
A sharp blade is nice. It doesn't matter too much since you are cutting into the soft clay, unbaked clay. My blade's probably a little dull. Yeah, my blade's dull. So it's not one of my sharp tissue blades. And as I think about that, I'm thinking, if I did this with a tissue blade and my thumbs are here, I would have red clay instead of gold clay. So if I cut too deep, and let me just pick a side and cut into it. If I cut, great, I can't cut too deep. I've done this so many times, I can't cut too deep. There we go. Now I'm getting into it. So you can see, even if I cut deep, I still have an image there.
Yeah.
And it is smooth. I mean, I have definitely cut very deep. But I'm so paranoid about it, it's not easy for me to cut too deep. Now, if I cut, the deeper I go, you can see I'm losing the fine pattern here. Which is why I caution against cutting overly deep. But as you can see, the mica is disturbed fairly deep into the clay. So that you do get a good, nice ghost image out of that. And I am going to pull this up, and pass that to Christine so she can verify that there are parts of that that are very smooth. And yet the image is still there. It's got a slight movement with a light so that you get shadow effect. So you get a nice dimensional effect to it.
That's amazing. This is so intricate.
Christina's over there having fun with the
Still.
It takes some while to get all
Yeah.
the paper off.
Yeah.
It
think
is,
this is getting there.
it is not a technique for the impatient.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Maybe a couple more times.
Yeah, I'd let it dry and see where there's
Mhm,
something
some
left.
white.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You can tell, right? Because it's
Yeah.
white, that means
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
a paper
And it's
there.
fuzzy looking.
Yeah, it'll be white and fuzzy if you don't
Yeah.
have the clay off. Okay, as long as I'm doing images and clay, and I have lost my black and silver clay. I've got my silver clay here. The black is somewhere else. Okay, I got black and silver.
Mhm, so-
Oh, I think that's silver. Supposedly silver. I am going to, this is called the Sutton Slice. Those of you that have been around me for a while have seen it before. This was developed by a polymer clay artist named Paul Sutton up in the Northwest. He demonstrated it to Lisa Pavelka, and Lisa showed me. And each one of us have put our own variations on it. But then, hey, we're artists and that's what we do. I'm going to show you the simple approach. And then I will go into a more, if we have time and if I feel like it, if I'm so inclined, we will do something different. But right now, I'm going to run this through the POS machine a few times. Just so I get for the Sutton Slice, what you do is you start with a base layer of clay. In this case, it will be my silver. And then you put another, you're going to put a textured image, let me say, on top of that. You'll understand what I mean by that in just a few minutes. But right now, let me get the silver conditioned so that it will soft. I need it somewhat soft, not overly soft. I do need it uniformly thick. If it's not, it's got to be the same thickness all the way through. It doesn't have to be really thick. Why am I making it really thick? I don't know why I'm making it really thick. It's a good question. It doesn't. There. I've got a sheet of silver clay. Right. Sorry, I'm thinking about what it is I need to do. And then I've got some black clay. I'm going to set the silver clay aside for a moment. Then I've got some black clay that I hope I can convince to get soft. We will find out in a minute. It's going to take a little bit of coaxing for the black clay to get soft, but it will come around.
Oh, put a drop of liquid clay on
No. See, this is more black than I need as I think about it, but let me cut it into some thinner slices and run them through the POS machine. There we go. We're starting to work. That should be enough black for what I want to demo. Pick up my scraps so I don't leave a mess on the table. Now the black, I do need to get it soft. Sure, it's go through enough times that it has become fairly soft. And this technique involves a rubber stamp. And again, deeply etched is nice. That is what we're going to be doing, Chris. Yes, Christina picked up a piece. This is the technique we're going to demonstrate right now. There are several samples of it. And some variations I've played with, made a button with it.
Wow. So pretty.
All kinds of fun you can have. So let me I'm gonna take it down a few steps to get it thinner. And still doesn't need to be thinner, it just needs to be soft. And remember, if I can get it thinner, it will get softer quicker. And you people don't have to sit here and watch me condition clay, which is so much fun. Okay. One more. There we go. That feels good. Now, to do this technique, you take a rubber stamp and there's a couple options here. What Lisa Pavelka does, so if you ever, I'm going to demonstrate that so that if you ever watch her do a demo, you will see what she's doing. She takes little pieces of clay, puts them down on the rubber stamp, and presses them in. Now, you do not want to use any release agent with this. You want it into the raw clay. Some of the techniques involving rubber stamps and clay, you want a release agent so that it releases what easily. You actually want the clay to get into the stamp and kind of hold in there because of step number 2, which involves shaving the clay off the stamp. And so I've decided I just want one particular image off of this thing. So I am going to press clay just into that one image. And I've got way more clay here than I need. But again, as I said, Lisa puts small pieces on there and presses them in, each one trying to make sure she gets each little piece where she wants it and well embedded into the clay. And again, this is a good time. Don't worry about how hard you press. But the goal is to get it really, 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 really into the clay. Because again, as with the ghost image, I'm going to be trying to shave this off, but I want to leave the clay in the stamp this time and only shave off what is not embedded into the stamp. So you need to get it well embedded into the stamp. And yes, you can actually stand on it at this point if you really want to. I don't recommend it. Okay.
Thin.
Got that down there. Now, from there, and again, I'm gonna hope I've got it well embedded so that I'm going to simply shave off the clay. Now, don't worry, the rubber is vulcanized rubber. And if especially if I come in with a shallow cut, you can see I'm not really cutting the rubber. So it's unlikely you're going to cut the rubber. Don't worry about that. Although do be careful. Don't go cutting your rubber stamp and accusing me of telling you you can't do it. You can do it. I've done it, but it's not easy. And again, I'm bending the blade, so I've got control, and I'm just going to try and shave this thing down. And I'm going to take small cuts. And like I said, I've got way more clay on this than I need. But I'm going to do small cuts. I'm using my fingers to hold the rubber stamp in place as I cut. Neatness does not count in this, but you want to make shallow cuts so that you don't pull the clay out of the rubber stamp. There are other things besides the rubber stamp you can use for the image. I'll let you experiment, come up with something else that you like to work with. But right now, I'm going to simply demonstrate this with a rubber stamp. And at this point, you can see I've got the clay that's embedded in the rubber starting to show as pieces of black clay on the rubber stamp. And we just keep doing that. Until I get everything shaved down to the level of the rubber stamp. And again, I want to come in with a shallow cut, because if I cut too steep an angle, I can pull the clay out of the rubber stamp. And if I go too aggressive, I can pull the clay out of the rubber stamp. So you want to be very careful about that. And you want to keep good control of the rubber stamp so it doesn't walk away on you. I will take a couple passes through here just to kind of make sure I've got the clay off the stamp, so I don't have any little shadows showing up. This is not a time for a ghost image. And I'm going to pull the clay out of a few places that I don't want it. Okay. Pull that clay out of there. Now I should have, I'm going to put a little clay up here. Just, I like that piece of the image, so we'll pick it up. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to come in and shave that off. It shouldn't be too hard to do because I've got a things fairly uniform throughout this. That came off nicely. Keep thinking that's a piece of clay right there, but it doesn't come when I shave it, which tells me it's probably not clay, Bob. So don't try and pull it up. Okay, I've got a nice image there. Now comes the fun part. Set my black clay aside, bring my tile with the silver clay on it into the picture. I'm going to make sure I get the black image where it's well onto the silver. I'm going to press down again firmly. Want to make sure the black clay and the silver clay meet and like each other. I don't want to press too hard because I'm not trying to put an image into the silver. I just want to make sure the black clay gets transferred. And again, I only do this with unmounted stamps because I want to pull up a corner. And as I pull, I can see if the image is being transferred. And you can see right here, I've got a piece that did not transfer. So I can put it back down since nothing has moved and press and notice I'm really flexing the clay. I'm trying to get flexing the rubber stamp. I'm trying to get the rubber stamp to release the clay.
Bob, can you use
And
a roller?
if
for
I
the-
put a lot of flex on it, it opens up all the little spaces. And again, I've got one that didn't take, so I'm going to push him back down. And there he did. Okay, that guy didn't take, so I can push him down and press a little harder. And as I do this, you can see I'm getting all of the clay out of the rubber stamp. Let go. There we go.
Yeah.
And onto my silver backing piece.
Bob, can you use a roller on this?
And that's everything I wanted to play with. So now, if you want, you can take a deli sheet. If you've got a deli sheet, take a deli sheet and put over the top of that. And I would use a clean deli sheet, not a wrinkled one, and just lightly brush it just to help things stick. You don't want to push too hard, but you want to put just enough pressure that if things haven't stuck, that they do now stick. And there you have a very nice
Wow,
dimensional image this time.
wow. Wow, that is amazing. The details,
Nice.
yeah,
And you can see
wow,
this piece here
Yeah.
is that image. And it's a nice focal piece for a necklace
Yeah. Or pen.
or a pen. Here I've got a rubber stamp that is orange blossoms, or sorry, cherry blossoms,
Yeah.
cherry blossoms. I did a Skinner blend for the background. So I've got gold going to blue. They kind of look like a sunset. So I've got cherry blossom shadow
Yeah, gradual colors.
with a shadow behind it. Nice sunset image.
Yeah.
This one, I'll talk about it. I'm not gonna do it. You'll notice I grade from silver to black for the background. So I've got silver on the bottom and black on the top. But the Sutton Slice top has got black on the bottom and silver on the top. So I actually took the gradation clay, a Skinner blend, black to silver, and instead of putting small pieces into this, I took an entire block of, there was a Skinner blend, ran it through a thin setting on the POS machine. So I've got something about like that, and press that whole thing into the clay as it is. Now this is a little trickier because you can get air bubbles trapped underneath. So when you do this, you need to make sure you start pressing in the middle and press firmly in the middle, really press firmly in the middle, and then work your way out to the edges to make sure that you don't trap the air. And again, it's a lot harder to make sure you get the clay embedded into the rubber stamp everywhere. And you've got the problem if you're doing a Skinner blend instead of a solid color, you can't go back and fill it in. So you've got to make sure on the first pass you do it right. But if you do it carefully and you make sure you get really well embedded clay, then everything works out fine. And if it doesn't, then you got clay embedded in a rubber stamp that you need to kind of peel off and see if, again, if I peel the stamp off the clay, it comes off a lot easier than if I try to pull the clay off the stamp. Okay, so those are a combination of techniques everyone to go home and play with today. And are there any questions?
Yes.
If there are no questions, I will stop the recording. If I can figure out how to stop the recording. Somewhere there's a way to stop their recording. Stop, click